Hello, grade 7s. Welcome back to another lesson about the ancient Israelites. Today we're going to talk about two topics that go hand in hand. Firstly, we're going to talk about the fall of the Israelite kingdom. So last lesson we talked about the kingdom of Israel and the kingdom of Judah. So unfortunately today we're going to see that those two kingdoms crumble. But out of that comes the growth of Judaism. So those are the two things we're going to aim to understand today. And we have two learning objectives, and I would like you to write this all down in your notes. Firstly, we're going to explore the reasons behind the fall of both Israel and Judah. Why did they crumble? We'll find out. Secondly, we're going to understand why, in the wake of this, many people turn to the Jewish religion. And that one we're also going to explore a bit more in our next class. So please write this in your notes. Please remember to write down today's date, underline your title, write down the learning objectives. Also remember, guys, you can pause the video at any time you like. You can go for a walk or go get a drink of water. And go at your own pace. Okay, let's get started. All right, troubled time for the Israelites. So on the last lesson we left off, we had talked about the formation of the two kingdoms. The Israelites were able to leave Egypt. If you recall, we talked about Moses, and he parted the way of the Red Sea, and we had these tribes return to the Holy Land here, or the Promised Land as we had called it, and they had set up the two kingdoms. Firstly, we had the kingdom of Judah, which is the brown place right here. Where's my mouse? There it is. And the capital is Jerusalem. That's that red dot right there. Above it, north of it, we have the kingdom of Israel. It's the green place right here. And the capital, this red dot, is Samaria. If you recall, we also have the Phoenicians. They were the sailors and the traders who lived on the coast. They live right there. And of course, we have our Egyptians here. So since we had our 12 tribes settle, so remember 10 tribes are in Israel, and then we have 2 tribes who are still in Judah. Around this time, we have 2 more civilizations that are appearing. First is the Assyrians, and then we have the Chaldeans right here. And we're going to talk about both of these in a little bit. And I just want you to notice that right here, this red dot is Babylon. We have talked about that before when we were talking about Mesopotamia. If you recall, this is going to be the Fertile Crescent right here. But no longer are these people called the Mesopotamians. That has changed. Okay, so while the Israelites were dividing their kingdom, the Assyrians and Chaldeans were building empires in the Southwest Asia. These peoples wanted to control the trade routes that ran through the Israelite kingdom. So trade at this time is very important. If you think about it, if you sell an item or you trade it, you're going to grow wealthier. So these people want all of that wealth, all of that money. So it's in their best interest to be able to control all the trade routes. So here we have these 3 kingdoms here. They're all along the Mediterranean Sea on the coast. Same with Egypt. And that's very valuable territory. And these 2 civilizations want it all. Small and weak, the kingdoms of Israel and Judah felt threatened by their powerful neighbors. During this troubled time, people who became known as prophets brought hope to the kingdom of Israel. Now, we discussed prophets in the last lesson, but just in case you have forgotten, a prophet is someone who can hear the word of God. So they can spread the news. If they've heard a message from God, they can tell everyone. So at this time, there's many prophets in Israel. That's a really good word to make sure you have underlined in your notes, and you can write down that definition if you do not know it. So it's someone who can hear a message from God. So these prophets emphasize that people should please God by leading a moral life and helping others. That includes following the 10 Commandments. Other special messages were that being faithful meant more than going to a temple to worship. It meant working for a just society. The prophet Amos said that justice should roll down like waters and righteousness as a mighty stream. The Jewish goal of a just society also became an important part of Christianity and Islam. However, the warlike Assyrians were feared everywhere in the region. When they conquered a nation, the Assyrians destroyed its main buildings and scattered the population. Assyrians then settled in the territory. So they would come in, force everyone out, and then they would take that region. In 1722, the Assyrians conquered Israel and scattered the 10 tribes across their empire. So just to give you some context, in 1722, it's been about 200 years since King Solomon ruled, and about 250 years since King David was the king. Over time, the Israelites were forced to move and lost contact with those who remained in Israel and Judah. Historians do not yet know what happened to these tribes. They are often called the lost tribes of Israel. So today we still don't know where these people went. The Assyrians brought people from everywhere in their empire to live in Samaria. So if you recall, that is the capital of Israel right there. So the Assyrians right here brought in people. They had conquered it, and now they're settling in that region. So you can see, I'm not sure if you realize, but all these blue things are rivers. So these are important for trade. So that's a great place to live. These settlers mixed with the surviving Israelites who had not been killed or forced to move. A new culture developed, and the people became known as Samaritans. The Samaritans adopted many Israelite beliefs. They worshiped the God of Israel, they read the Torah, and followed the Israelites' religious laws. Over time, their religious practices developed separately, and they had little contact. Judaism developed from the religious practices of the tribes of Judah. So we've talked about Israel. Now let's talk about what happened to Judah. Well, now only the small kingdom of Judah was left of the once proud empire of David. However, it did not last long because the Egyptians conquered it about 620 BCE. The Jews were able to keep their king, but they had to pay tribute to Egypt. However, Egyptian rule was cut short when the Chaldeans, so remember this group right here, conquered Egypt in 605 BCE. The Chaldeans became the new rulers of Judah. At first, the Chaldeans treated the Israelites like the Egyptians had before. They allowed the Jews to keep their king as long as they paid tribute. Several years later, the Jews united with the Egyptians to rebel against the Chaldeans. They're going to fight back. Judah held out against the Chaldean invasion until 597 BCE. That year, the king of the Chaldeans captured Jerusalem. So that is the capital city, the red dot right there. He punished the Jews severely. He made 10,000 Jews leave the city and live in Babylon. So as I mentioned, right here. So they were forced out of here and they had to go there. Then he appointed a new Jewish king. Soon the new king of Judah was planning a revolt against the Chaldeans to get them out. A prophet named Jeremiah warned him that another revolt was dangerous, but the king did not listen. So he did try to revolt. This time, the Chaldean ruler crushed Jerusalem. He destroyed the temple, bound the king in chains, and took him and thousands of Jews to Babylon. Jewish history this time became known as the Babylon captivity. So as you can see, a common theme that we've seen while talking about the ancient Israelites is they're constantly forced to move from this region. And this is something that we still see today. I'm sure you've heard of a conflict between Israel and Palestine. That's something I'd really like to investigate in class together. And I think that's really important to tie into today and what's going on with Israel. All right. exile and return. So the Jews called their time in Babylon an exile. This means they were forced to leave their homeland. That's another great key word to underline. Make sure you know the definition. So it means they were forced to leave their home. During their exile, the Israelite religion became what we call Judaism. While in Babylon, small groups of Jews met on the Sabbath. That's another really good word to underline. The Sabbath was a weekly day of worship and rest. The Jewish Sabbath goes from sundown Friday to sundown Saturday. These weekly meetings took place at synagogues or Jewish houses of worship. The synagogue meetings gave the people hope. So they need that hope. During the 500s BCE, a group of people called the Persians swept across Southwest Asia. Again, another common theme. We have all these civilizations in the region trying to conquer all this land and all this territory. So this is a new group. The Persians actually came and defeated the Chaldeans and took over Babylon. The Persian king Cyrus permitted Jews to return to Judah. So here in this painting I've put on the slide, you can see people are returning to Judah. However, some Jews decided to stay in Babylon, but most went home. They rebuilt Jerusalem, the capital city, and the temple that was destroyed. Cyrus appointed officials to rule the country and collected taxes from the people. So it wasn't all good. They got to go home, but now they're paying taxes to the Persians. The Persians also did not allow the Jews to have their own government or king, so the Jews depended mainly on their religious leaders, like temple priests and scribes, to help run their society. Many scribes became religious scholars. Under a scribe named Ezra, the Jews wrote the 5 books of Torah on pieces of parchment. They actually sewed those pieces of parchment together to develop these long scrolls. The Torah and writings that were added later made up the Hebrew Bible, so that's really important to note. Okay, for a second, let's talk about the Hebrew Bible, and we're going to end on this slide. So what is in the Hebrew Bible? Well, the Hebrew Bible is really a series of 34 books collected together. And that's made up of the Torah, which we've talked about, another collection called the Prophets, and the Writings. They would create the Hebrew Bible. Some of these books describe events in Jewish history. Others are books of poetry, literature, and proverbs. For example, Genesis, the first book of the Torah, tells about how God punished the world for its bad behavior. In Genesis, God tells Noah to build an ark. I'm sure you've heard this story. Noah, his family, and 2 of every animal on earth boarded the ark. Then a great flood covered the land, and only those on the ark escaped drowning. After the flood, God created a rainbow as a symbol of the promise to never again destroy the world with a flood. Genesis also explains why the world has languages. It tells how the people of Babel tried to build a tower to heaven. God disapproved and made the people speak in different languages, then scattered them around the earth. So that's another story in the Hebrew Bible. Parts of the Hebrew Bible describe God's plan for a peaceful future. The book of Daniel addresses this issue, and this is where this picture comes into play. You can see on your slide. Daniel lived in Babylon, as you know, was a part of the Chaldean Empire. He was actually a trusted advisor of the king in Babylon. However, he refused to worship the Babylon gods. So because of this, the Chaldeans threw Daniel into a lion's den, but God protected Daniel from the lions. The story was meant to remind Jews that God would rescue them. The Jews believed that evil and suffering would eventually be replaced by goodness. Christians and Muslims also share this idea of good triumphing over evil. All right, we're going to stop there today. I would like you to answer this question. What lesson did the story of Daniel present to the Jews? And we'll talk about it in class. See you then.